All right, it's time to continue on with Chapter 13, Media Economics. Let's just get running, okay? All right, now when we're dealing with the growing corporate aspects of the media industry, it's become very specialized, and it was very specialized in the way of it stopped getting away from generic over just trying to find a very broad audience. And that happened, big part of that happened in the 80s because of cable. The rise of cable. This allowed a whole other set of channels out there, interests. We start seeing things like CNN, All News, start seeing MTV, and totally changing the music scene and what it meant to be a music superstar, all sports, all Lifetime, which was specifically for women, so on and so forth, like that. So in the 1980s, with the rise of cable, we started seeing what they call niche marketing, looking for certain demographics. 18 to 34 men, 25 to 52 women, different demographics groups, trying to, and all part of it to make money and find people for advertising and who's gonna want to buy what, and we have to look at what stations that they're watching and what networks and what things that they're into. So you'll notice that the advertisements kind of fit the people who are considered their audience. And you found that it wasn't just younger people, but older people as well would be looking for their own types of things that interested them. And that's when they went there, you'd find a lot of the advertisements fit their groups. Why? Because they knew those were the people who were watching it. So the rise of specialization, really starting to see specific entertainment in certain places, really came about in this time, in this era. So I know you've been born into this. And this is all you've ever known. But before, when they just had a few networks, it was kind of generic and kind of broad-based entertainment to try to attract as many people as possible. They didn't go too deep into one or the other. They had sci-fi shows and sitcoms and stuff like that, but if you notice, a lot of them are not very focused or not very specialized in specific genres. So that became a big part of it. And it also comes up to the whole global, sense of the global community. And there was one big aspect of this that came about from this, and it's called synergy. Synergy, this seems like a really important thing, a really big piece of information that you need to know. When you hear synergy, it's not some crazy 80s superhero. It's actually a thing that we deal with in business and very much within the media industry. And the official, and this definition looks very important to understand, huh? I think you might see it someplace in the future. Okay, the synergy, the promotion and sale of different versions of a media product across various subsidiaries of a media conglomerate. And you'll find a lot of that. So when they in the book they came up with the example. Oh, this is why when you're on the Today Show, the Today Show will sometimes bring in like Jim Cantone from the Weather Channel. When you know he's around, there's something not going right. He's usually only when something's going down. It's not so good. But why? Because they have a stake. NBC, Universal, Comcast has a stake in the Weather Channel. This is sometimes when we see an NBC News anchor on MSNBC. That's why we see that cross promotion, cross use of talent, of resources. And also with NBC Universal and Comcast, cross promotion of programming and of certain programs that might be on NBC one day and then may be on like USA. So this whole, you see how it's all interconnected, how they have all these resources to work with, but there are bad sides to it, such as not enough media voices. We've talked about this time and again, but now we're really getting into it. So we're seeing how a company like this Comcast, NBC, Universal has become absolutely massive. It has become absolutely huge today. There are others. There's usually about a handful. We've talked about it, 6 right so far, and other big ones. But NBC, Universal with Comcast, and it's even more so because you think about now they've got cable, they've got broadcast, they've got all those different specific channels. They've also got the movies. They've also got the cable company that owns all of that. So they're distributing there. So you're seeing all these different things, and this hasn't even gotten into all the other media companies they own, from print and internet stuff and stuff like that. So you're seeing how much they do control, how much they do own. But that's the definition of synergy, and that's kind of a hands-on approach of sometimes of some things you may see every day. And here's another example from the book. They have a graphic here, and you think about ABC. We know ABC owns so much, including with Disney owns ABC and ESPN and so on and so forth. But think about it. All right, so you've got Disney. All right, so there's a new animated feature. We'll say Frozen 3. Okay, we're not there yet, but Frozen 3 is coming out. You're going to see commercials on it. Heck, you might even see a program on it. Oh, a sneak preview after the Goldbergs of Frozen 3. Okay, because it's an ABC, Disney. Definitely Disney stores. I'm sure many of you have been to Disney stores growing up. You're going to see stuff in there, all sorts of stuffed animals and backpacks and costumes. My daughter's gotten a few costumes over the years. I'm sure maybe some of you have gotten some costumes over the years. And then you think about the theme parks, how many theme parks they have between Disney World, Disneyland, Disney in Japan, and Paris, and Shanghai. So you're having all that promoted. Say Frozen 3 is being promoted there. And then it's Disney Channel, of course, and Freeform, which used to be the Family Channel, all owned. So you're seeing all sorts of promotion there. So, and that's a good chunk. That's a huge audience just for that one new movie. It could be in the theaters, could be coming on video or streaming. So you're seeing how this synergy works and how it allows them to promote the things that are coming out on a lot of different in a lot of different venues to help. So we're going to kind of get into the history of Disney and see how it's evolved over the years, from what it was, from very tiny, its simple, tiny beginnings, to where it is now, to the monstrous media conglomerate it is. Now, early on, it started very early with just this guy, Walt Disney. He is a real person. He was an animator. At first, he failed as an animator. So keep on trying and keep on pushing away at what you want to do. Lots of people who become tremendous successes do not start off that way. So I mean, you don't get much more successful than Disney. And I can't even imagine if he would think it got this big, because he died quite a while ago. But he started off with what was Mortimer Mouse. Now you know him as Mickey Mouse, and it was little cartoons at first before the movies, and that whole character really took off with Mickey Mouse. People just couldn't get enough of him. Then eventually they got into big live action movies, documentaries. They did full-length features. We've talked about the full-length feature Snow White. It was the first one in 1939. and that was a big deal. It took 4 years to get produced, and also eventually after a while they got into the movies and live. When they talk about live action, real acting movies with acting in it, and they were usually family entertainment. It wasn't anything of a mature nature. It was definitely more children oriented, but parents could still watch it and still enjoy it as well. This is where you start seeing stuff about nature with Disney because they understood, they wanted to get into other aspects like that. So you started seeing nature documentaries because people like nature, people like animals. They really got into that, and then television. I remember growing up, they were still I was born in '71, and even into the early '80s, they had a weekly show, Wonderful World of Disney, on Sunday nights. From what I remember, it might have been on other nights, but I always remember Sunday nights. Wonderful World of Disney, and they would show a lot of they had so much back then, even then, and Jiminy Cricket was a big part of that. But yeah, that was on all the time. Even though we only had a handful of broadcast networks in the '70s and into the early '80s before cable, they they still had that presence on there. And then also Buena Vista. Buena Vista is where you start a distribution company dealing with TV programming and movies and stuff like that. And they've expanded to other aspects. But this is where we start seeing that, and that's expanding the Disney empire. They start re-releasing movies like Snow White and Sleeping Beauty and all these things that came before. Why? Because they want to re-release them as movies, have that experience again in the theater, and of course they remastered it, and of course shortly after that, first it was VHS release for that. Then you have the super special edition of there might be an extra 13 seconds, or they've done something to remaster it in some way. And they'll always keep doing that, and they did that with DVD and Blu-ray, and they'll continue to do that. Special, and then with DVDs, you had the behind the scenes of the making of this to give them people more content. You're always going to see stuff like that to find new ways to remarket and resell things that have been around for a long time. Disney has absolutely cornered the market on that. Now, over the years, it has changed from a more local. It first started, in the Midwest, and then from a national thing to the global empire that it is. We start seeing, in 1966, Walt Disney passed away. He had accomplished so much, but to that point, there was just Disneyland. Disney World was not in existence. Plans were all set. He left. He had lots and lots and lots of plans for lots and lots and lots of things before he died. And some things are just starting to, or have just recently been developed, and they were still plans of some sort that he had way back then. It's for a while there, from '66 to like the early '80s, Disney had some problems. They lost some leadership with Walt Disney gone. They were still producing things, but they weren't doing anything new and innovative, and it was pretty much the same kind of stuff. They released some occasional movies, such as The Rescuers and things like that, Lady and the Tramp, and the Aristocats and stuff like that. But it was pretty much standard. They had their TV show, they had their movies they released every so often. Of course, they had Disney World and Disneyland, and they were doing good. They were not being innovative. They weren't being new until Michael Eisner. Michael Eisner, 1984, in the early '80s, mid to '80s, he comes on the scene. He is the new head of Disney, and he really takes the Disney corporation, the Disney empire, to a whole other direction. This is where they create Touchstone Pictures. When you had the Disney moniker to it, you think of animated, and the people love that stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they wanted to try to hash out to other types of movies, and this allowed them different content, but still getting money in. And so this allowed them to still own it, but they didn't have the Disney name to it, because with a Disney name, there's a certain expectation of wholesome, family-friendly entertainment, and Touchstone allowed them to do some more mature things with Touchstone Pictures. They still all had lots. They started producing other films such as Pocahontas and The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and so they start producing stories that have been around, but they're now producing them in a new way with they were hand drawn. Then eventually, computer animation starts getting better, 3D animation, and this is where we start seeing their relationship with Pixar, such as Toy Story, which I know you're very, very familiar with. Up eventually later on. So this is, we're seeing them grow. We see them getting bigger and more diverse with what they are creating. All right, so this is where we start seeing, it was always synergy was an idea, but this is where Disney, because they're owning so many different things and they have their hands in so many different types of media and so many different outlets, nowhere where they are today, but back then that was still a big deal with what they were doing. So in the 1990s, this is where we really start seeing what you're getting used to knowing Disney as, of what they own. Before the 1990s was not that long ago. This is where we see them buying ABC, which also included ESPN. This is that was a massive deal for Disney picking them up. This is where we start seeing Disney has all this content with all these wonderful movies and characters and how they produce things, and they just converted it. They converted it into a new form by putting out Broadway musicals. Think about the Lion King. Lion King was considered one of the biggest over the top, most absolutely massively well done Broadway musical, and everybody knew the story, but they did it in a totally different way, in a totally different venue, that they made that a whole new type of blockbuster for them. They started opening up more theme parks. This is where we start seeing Paris getting their Disney theme park, and Tokyo started getting one. They start opening them up all over the world. And we start seeing Disney Channel had been in the U.S. for so long, but then it's expanding to the Middle East, it's expanding to North Africa. So we're really starting to see the global stretch of Disney, of how they're growing and just getting to all corners of the planet. They would go and do productions on it, movies on it, cover stuff on it, do documentaries on stuff all over the world. But this is where we start seeing their reach, of so many people watching and taking in and buying stuff and going to their parks all over the world. People didn't have to just go to the United States for that. They had their own little corner right in what might have been their quote-unquote backyard. So after a while, Eisner was there for a good long while, from the early 80s till the early 2000s. You're talking to like about a 20-year era of Disney under Michael Eisner, and he's considered one of the big figures in the history of Disney and the history of just this media business. But after a while, they just started having problems again. Eisner was not able to acclimate to the newer economy, the newer reality. Remember, internet comes in the mid 90s. That changes things up. He kind of got left behind a little bit. And then Bob Iger, that's this guy here with Mickey Mouse, he takes over for Eisner. and he takes it into a whole other era, and an era that you're very, very familiar with, because this is your lifetime now. This is things that you have grown up with. This is after you've been born. And this is where, because for a while there, remember Pixar was its own individual production place, and there were some issues, so they didn't do stuff with them for a while. But then under Iger's leadership, they got back together with Pixar, and then eventually took them over. Distribution deal with DreamWorks, also along the lines of with Pixar. So you're seeing DreamWorks connection with Disney there. Miramax films and its radio stations were part of the whole Disney conglomerate, and they sold those off. They became a partner with Hulu. I know there's already lots of other mega companies in Hulu providing content, but this is where they start going in there too. And then, of course, what you guys are much more familiar with Marvel, the Marvel universe with so many different characters, and Spider-Man and the X-Men, and recently, and all those other in the Avengers and all that. They got them under their umbrella, and then the Lucasfilm. And you all know how I feel about that. That's something I was shocked when this actually happened. Even though they had a working agreement with them, there was Disney stuff at Disney at Disney parks before that. But now they have their corporate hands in that, and you'll continue to see Star Wars content from here into perpetuity with now with their Disney Plus and all the different movies and the video games and the comic books and all the things. You're going to constantly see movies coming out year after year after year in different forms and different television things like The Mandalorian, stuff like that, and Clone Wars. And so, they've gained control of quite a bit, and that was under Bob Iger's leadership. All right, so now we talked about Disney. Now it's time to talk about some more of the aspects of this industry, of the media economics, and there's been some expansion. So this is of when you're creating these conglomerates, you have more of an audience. Things are getting cheaper to make. Things became so it's more profitable for them. It was not just within the company in the country, but it goes outside the borders, all across the planet. This allowed them to, because of the global market now, you have to understand this. Because of the global market, they could produce things, and Disney sometimes and other major companies will produce things that they might spend like a ton of money, say, on a movie. And how are we going to get by on that movie if we're spending all that money on it? And how are we going to are we possibly going to have the sales on a domestic level to make it up? It doesn't matter if it does or doesn't now, because they're going to make a good amount of money on that domestic theater ticket sales and other kinds of marketing and stuff like that with sales. But then really, because they've got a global market, they have even more customers. So this is where the real money comes. So they may make their money back, just on domestic, but then they have a whole other global release. So all those other people across the planet, they have an opportunity to buy and take in their stuff that way. So this has really expanded their potential for earnings. Now, over the years, with the internet and this thing called convergence, and we talked about convergence before, with convergence of the cross training and the different mediums of print and broadcast and film and books and so on and so forth, how it's all modeled together. A lot of these more traditional companies, they struggled with digital, struggled with the internet. Those who got it are doing better than ever. Others that didn't went away. Certain things such as like YouTube, YouTube had more leeway, so some other traditional broadcast things would have, not the advantages of a YouTube with stuff. Um, and it was also trying to figure out how how to get people to pay for certain things online. They figured out different ways because the internet was new, and we've gone through all this before. But it's part of the whole expansion and them getting used to a whole new technology. That's how companies survive. Not if they just refuse to take part in certain things, they're gonna die. Especially with something as big as the internet and the whole aspect of that. Um, so they know they have to acclimate to it, and the ones who are successful do. All right. So now we talk with more of the about the more traditional ABC, NBC, CBS, Universal, the movie companies, stuff like that, and how they work. Now with this whole internet thing, it has totally changed everything because now this internet thing, yes, is the gosh darn internet thing created a whole new mega media companies who started doing with more uh, computer stuff, but it's reached out to a whole new level. You talk about your Amazons and Apple and Facebook and Google and Microsoft. Microsoft was just dealing with computers, but it's gone to a whole other level. Some of this stuff didn't exist. What was Facebook was just the social media thing at Harvard, and it became a big to do what it is today. It's one of the biggest companies on the planet on how much money they make, and they sell information, advertising information, stuff like that, and it's kind of shows you the power of information. Um, it has become very powerful. But the problem is, the thing is, how do you keep people coming? And it's compelling narratives. They keep talking compelling narratives, good stories, good things, or certain things that will attract people to what you have. And they've done it on a different way. And a lot of times, the people who are creating the things that people are coming back for are the people who are using it. Think about Facebook. They are putting their stuff out. They're saying their things. They have technology now that they can put out there, and people are looking at it and passing it along. And this is letting the advertisers know, hey, we have all these people on. Yeah, you want to advertise here. How do we best advertise to them? That's where we start getting into when we get into the whole them knowing with the computer technology and how to deal with that. Um, so the digital age, you can be small. You can be, and if you've got the right product, or you can get a buzz together and get people out there and put something out that the little person, who has nothing can eventually become bigger, but you have to have something people want to see or take part in or watch or listen to or whatever the case may be. So it gives people an opportunity they never had before because now they don't need to have all this fancy um, technology, even though the technology we have now may not consider fancy, but it was not even a thought way back in the day. You didn't have access to that kind of stuff. Now everything is able to create stuff like that for you. So consider yourself very lucky to be where you are and when time you grew up because you have a lot of things we didn't have before. So it's take advantage. You have a chance. All right. Now, over the years, we talked about monopolies, antitrusts, and lots of times you'll find that a lot of companies, and this is why these mega companies do have so many different interests, like print and film and broadcast and cable companies and so on and so on and so forth. And so this is so what they do is they've got their hand in so many different um, buckets of different things, they still they have so many and so many different things that it gives them flexibility, so they don't have to worry about necessarily being a monopoly. They are oligopolies, and we talked about how oligopolies are a handful of companies that own just about so many different things. But they don't own so much that they're considered a monopoly. So that's why they don't own all the television stations. They own a good amount of them, but then they also own some film, and they don't own all of those. And they do own some book publishers, but they don't own all of those. They just own a certain amount. Um, but there's enough cross promotion going on. There's enough companies out there. There's enough media out there that they're still allowed to. It still falls within the legal parameters, so they can do that. Now, um, the antitrust laws that we have here, and it's not really recognized across the globe. Other countries don't necessarily have the monopoly laws, so that's why you'll see sometimes um, employee. That's why employees have gone off to the other outsourcing of employees to other places producing things because it's cheaper there. But they don't have those laws in other countries, so that also kind of adds to their profile as well when you're dealing with these media companies. Now, with all of this, with the companies, the media companies, be promoting so much, creating so much, a handful of companies creating as much as they are, we're seeing a concept called cultural imperialism. And because they do have such a reach, you're finding that some things that have become more traditional in other countries, part of their culture, part of what they create, their movies, their television, their art, their books, their stories, whatever the case may be, are kind of getting lost in the shuffle of the big produced things that everybody knows and everybody wants to see. Um, so this can be a problem because there's some wonderful things out there that are being created, and they're getting lost in the shuffle. They're getting lost in the shuffle of the big blockbusters that everybody wants to see, and they have to go and hear or listen or whatever the case may be. Um, so that's part of the problem. We have it's always been an issue with the business world. Where you look at McDonald's, you can go to McDonald's in China, and all over in Japan and all that. But that's the same concept. But is really good produced, well made cultural content not getting out because of the stuff that these mega companies can create because they have that reach. Now, this is something we have to think about, and so it's okay to like this stuff, but keep an eye out on stuff outside of our little bubble. That's part of kind of like I was telling you about the horizon expansion thing. This is another aspect that there can be really great things to watch and listen to and take part in. Um, you just got to keep your eyes and ears open. That's another aspect of this too, because we're a global community, and we don't have to just necessarily take in the big people, the big media conglomerate stuff. There are other stuff out there that can give you a great deal of joy and enjoyment and do some real good. So keep an eye out for that too. That's another reason why I do the horizon expansion thing. Keep your eyes open because there's a lot going out there, and it's easy to miss. Now, some supporters of it say of the culture imperialism sometimes will say, especially if it's coming from the United States, there are certain themes, such with freedom and stuff like that, that may raise questions to people in other countries that might not be as free. So this can kind of give a rise to certain thoughts that people might not have had because they don't have access to it. So it is creating. They also say the popular culture creates a global village of we come together of understanding. Yeah, there's differences with language and other cultural aspects, but these things can help us come together with the expansion of these media companies and what they produce. Critics are going to say protests can be turned into products, and they lose their bite. So, what does that mean? That can mean um, these protests that are supposed to have um, some sort of meaning to them, and it could be something really bad and that needs to be addressed. And these things can the global entertainment can water it down. It can make it not seem as important. Also, the cultural dumping, native cultures of an area. I kind of talked about it before, but although they're being lost to history in some cases, some really great things. So we don't want to do that. We also don't want to disconnect people from where they come from. People have come all over the place, and they have all their traditions and their deeply held beliefs and their cultures and their food and their legends and whatever the case may be, which is all what makes us stronger by everyone sharing in that. It's important that what we create from the mass media, the Disneys, the Comcast, Universals, um, aren't disconnecting the people and having them who come from these cultures and come from these rich traditions, that they're forgetting it and they're getting disconnected and they're being lost to history because people aren't caring anymore. So that's a very important aspect too. All right, so it's a matter of when you're dealing with the media marketplace, um, concerns of that they're worried about the media worrying about just making sure they get the most money, making sure they're able to market to advance so people can see their stuff. And what are the messages they putting out? Are the messages good? Are they bringing up social questions that need to be brought up? Or are they just going and putting out lighthearted stuff? It might look real neat, but there's not a whole lot of substance to it. And a lot of times, yeah, that's the case. You'll find messages even in the big things, the big highly produced mega hits, but uh, not nearly as much as maybe we should. So that's the criticism that's out there. Also, public debate over certain issues, it makes it difficult when you talk and to talk about certain things because they're making so much money, so they have so much influence over so many things. Let's really face facts. When you have that much money, you have influence, and they have lobbyists that deal for them and with them in many different governments across the country, including this one. You don't think that Disney has lobbying groups, or NBC Universal has lobbying groups, or News Corp has lobbying. They all have them. So this, if there's certain things that could be detrimental to these companies, um, and they use that influence, how does that hurt the everyday people in these different places all over the world? Another aspect: how much money is the corporate entity, and how much money, how much power is giving them over these people who make policy? So that makes it really important to understand too. And then also, um, local groups, consumer movements, working to challenge big media. How can these small little grassroots campaigns who are worried about certain things and they want to be able to create things from just like, remember, Disney started off that way too. It was just Walt Disney. Can there be another Walt Disney? Will there ever be another Walt Disney? It makes it harder in some ways. I mean, the internet makes it easier, so we are lucky that way to have that like we do now. How quickly that gets bought up by a bigger media conglomerate, that's the question. But at least we have something there that we've never had before, and that's all part of this. Sorry about that. Um, it's not quite over yet. There is also the thought of, think about, they all these mega media companies have news, TV, paper, internet kind of thing. How is that affected? And we all know they're affected. Every single one of them. And you can see in their coverage. You can see in what they put on. You can see what they highlight. And you can see in the coverage. It's like, oh, we like them. You know that News Score is probably going to be pro-Trump, and NBC Universal with NBC and MSNBC is going to be anti-Trump. And then another, more left or right. Is that what we need? Where is the independence? Where is that's a big aspect of it. And then are the people getting what they need to know how to make good decisions so they can have a free society and make correct decisions on who should be in different positions representing us? How does the media conglomerates, how they produce news, what they tell you in the different forms that are out there in broadcast or internet and all these things that they have, is it doing more bad than good? Are they just putting out an agenda and making sure you think a certain way? We saw that with Bernays. We saw that with PR and stuff like that, and that whole aspect of how they view government. And this is part of that. See, this is what I'm trying to get you to think. All right? I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to get you to think. All right? And this is what this is. Where with great power comes great responsibility. It's not just pressing some buttons and putting out some stuff. I don't care. I'm just doing my job. It's so much more than that because there's so much more control. You got to learn it now, so when you do go out there, you can spread that word and get that mindset out there more, because we're it. We are the guardians of freedom. We are the ones who are supposed to keep track of things and keep people in power who are quote unquote in power. And we're supposed to make sure they have limits. Because if we're not doing it, then they don't have any limits, and then you're just yelling at each other and being nothing more than quote unquote. This isn't my thing. It's a term used from political people, useful idiots, quote unquote useful idiots, who are just yelling at each other, basically being, they're given a line to put out there, and I'm going to follow it loyally because that's what I'm supposed to do. And this is who the good people are. This is who the bad people are. And I have to just keep going on and doing this. And we're just getting caught up in much bigger things. We have to think. We have to be able to sift through that. That's why we're here. If we're going to create any form of media, be it PR, advertising, journalism, anything like that, or other stuff, we have to understand what we're doing. And part of the whole media economy, economics, what things own, who owns what, is part of that, understanding that. And it's on us, it's on you as future mass comm professionals to follow through with that. Don't just say, oh, that's not my job. It is your job. Too many people think like that. That's why we have the problems that we have. It's time to make a change with that. All right, that's it. Sorry I went back on the block on the end of thing. I probably got some of you all excited, but this is the last bit, and for chapter 13. Okay, so thanks a lot. Bye.